Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at our horoscopes for the month of May. And I am joined, as always, by my colleague and friend Alex Amorosi, who is going to be helping me break horoscopes down today, as he does every month. I'll have him come on in just a second. Anyway, that's our agenda for today. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. And you can find a transcript of today's talk or any of my talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. And the main promo I want to do today before we get into our horoscopes, I'm going to take you over to nightlightastrology.com and remind you that our year one program, our horary program, and our year two program begin in just a little bit. If you go to the courses tab here, click on first year course, you can learn more about it, and you can learn more about it on the page there, And as you scroll down to the very bottom, you will find the enrollment options. The early bird payment is available until May 15th. That early bird sale only lasts until May 15th. The early bird installment plan, if you prefer to pay monthly, is also only available until May 15th. Then the prices go up to our normal price points. Tuition assistance is also available for all of my programs. If you want to study at Nightlight and you need a little help to make it happen, just click on the Apply Now button for tuition assistance, and we let you choose a price point within a sliding scale, and then you get matched with the plan, and voila, you're signed up. And this is for people who might need a little help. You're on a fixed income. You want to make sure that you're not spending outside of your means. We really appreciate and respect the fact that there are people coming from a lot of different backgrounds and socioeconomic situations, and we don't think that astrology should be inaccessible to people that only, astrology should be for everyone if there's a sincere desire to study. So we try to make the programs affordable. And at the end of today's video, after Alex and I sign off, if you stick around, you'll hear me do a little deeper promo on the course so you can learn more about it. All right, well, that is it for today. So on that note, I am going to bring Alex on. Hey,
man.
We're
How's
back. Yeah.
We're back.
We're back in action. Eclipse season is done. Leave us the fuck alone.
I don't want to oversell this Taurus new moon, but man, does it look like a nice...
Oh, dude.
Especially compared to what we've had, like it just looks like such a nice cap off to this whole season. Holy shit.
Right. Yeah, last month was like an MMA match in Aries, and this I feel like this month is like let's go to Ben and Jerry's. Let's get
some time in the garden. Let's just meander in the forest for a little while. I know it's
for
crazy.
Sure.
The contrast, is really insane.
Yeah, and it really is like one of the things that I've talked about on the YouTube channel recently is the fact that the ruler of the eclipse, Mars, was all kinds of jacked up in Pisces with Saturn, with Neptune being in Venus's exaltation, while Venus is debilitated in Mars's sign of Aries. Venus, of course, also debilitated in Aries while ruling the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And now we have Venus in Taurus and Mars in Aries. The rulers of those recent big events are now in much more stable, powerful, natural places where we should start to see some of the more constructive changes promised by those events starting to take place because the dignities of the rulers are picking up. And we also have things this month like, later in the month, we're going to see the sun conjoin Jupiter. So Jupiter's death and rebirth is happening right as it's coming off from the conjunction to Uranus. Jupiter's changing signs into Gemini, which is a pretty light, I would say it's a lighthearted, fun, spirited place for Jupiter, even though some of the Jupiter-Mercury dynamics can be a little tricky. But a new moon in Taurus, let's take a look at it, and we'll just kind of preview the two major things that we're going to include in your horoscopes this month. Okay, so we're looking at the new moon in Taurus on May 7th, which is right here. This is an exalted new moon that's in Taurus, along with Jupiter, Uranus, and host Venus, who is under the beams of the sun, but protected by virtue of being in her own sign, which is called being in your own chariot. You can also see that Mars is in Aries. So that event is number one on our list. And then the second event we're going to take a look at doesn't come until later part of the month, right around May 25th into the 26th. Jupiter changes signs into Gemini. This is happening as Jupiter's also starting to recover from combustion and moving into the morning star phase. So it's Jupiter being reborn. Venus Jupiter will be co-present in the same sign in Gemini at the end of the month. So a lot of emphasis on Taurus and Gemini this month. So those are the two whole sign houses that we're going to visit, but we're really visiting them through the lens of multiple different events. We've got this month Mercury entering Taurus as well later in the month. We've got a Venus-Uranus conjunction in Taurus that happens right around May 18th. And then May 19th, we have the Sun-Jupiter cazimi in Taurus. There's just like tons of energy in Taurus. The Sun will also conjoin Uranus in Taurus, by the way. I back up just a little bit. That'll happen around May 13th, about 5 days after this, the new moon. So there's so many events just happening over and over in Taurus that we're going to take another look at this sign. And the new moon, an exalted new moon in Taurus, it really does promise to be a much more Venusian, stable, earthy, pleasurable experience. The last month was really tumultuous. So that's and then Jupiter changing signs into Gemini. Those are the things we're looking at. But what strikes you about these events before we go into it, Alex?
I think the major thing I'm looking at here is getting Mars into rulership and Venus into rulership. Is that things that, in a general sense, things that have felt very difficult or you had to really work really hard for through this more tumultuous season become a little bit easier. It's like a little bit like being back in your own house where you know where everything is. You can search out what you need. You can find, you know where the towels are in the closet. You know where the detergent is under the sink. You just kind of, you don't have to think as much about it. I think what was happening in April was by virtue of, a lot of planet Venus being in her exile, Mars being, kind of conjoining Saturn. There was a feeling of like really having to work hard, having to figure things out from a very unfamiliar perspective. And I think as we work into this month, especially when Venus moves into Taurus and Mars moves into Aries, there's a sense where it's like, okay, I know how to take action on these ideas that have come up over April with a greater sense of ease. I've been talking a lot to clients about that lately too. Just like, I think what's feeling kind of foggy and a little bit confused, especially some of the Pisces energy being activated, starts to feel a little bit more, there's a more clarity of purpose in what to do coming up this month.
Yeah. I think we're also starting to see that if there's been this promise of revolution, breakthrough, and this kind of opening from the Jupiter-Uranus dynamic, that we weren't seeing it right away. We're not. It's like because the ruler was dinged up, and even the eclipse, the solar eclipse in Aries wants to push forward, but Mars was stuck with Saturn and then Neptune, and so I just feel like doors are opening and momentum is being gained, and you're starting to see the wheels turn, whereas before they were kind of spinning out in the mud. But yeah, that's how I would see this. But Jupiter moving into Gemini is also interesting because we're dealing with Jupiter's movement into a whole new domain of the chart. So we're going to take a look at that as well and try to pair together the emphasis on Taurus and Gemini. So you ready? Should we dive in?
Let's do it. Let's go.
All right. Awesome. Let's start with, I'll lead us off with Aries. So for all of you out there, we recommend listening to your rising sign. You can listen to your sun sign, but the rising sign will correspond with the whole sign house version of your birth chart, which is what we who practice Hellenistic astrology typically use. So recommend that. Ancient astrologers used it. Indian astrologers use it. Whole sign houses also will correspond with the rising sign horoscope that any kind of horoscope writer does every month. So on that note, for Aries out there, whether you're a rising or sun or what have you, the Aries horoscope is looking at all of these events in the second house in Taurus. We know that's where Jupiter-Uranus has been, and we know that the idea there has been about a revolution with respect to resources. Resources can be anything that you are in possession of or that you are cultivating or developing. And it can be anything that's physical, but it could also be a skill, or it could be a psychological trait. Really, quite literally, anything you are cultivating that can be an asset. and anyone or anybody around you who acts as a valuable aid or asset also. So there's some real breakthroughs happening in that space, and you might see that the momentum is picking up too, where you've been waiting for this kind of Jupiter Uranus moment. You might really not notice it picking up from the new moon on May 7th moving forward. The other thing that comes to my mind, of course, is going to be Jupiter's entrance into Gemini. And I'm actually, I'm not going to move the chart back and forth for every single one because it'll drive me nuts. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of make it obvious that Jupiter's going to scoot right into here in the third house. And Jupiter in Gemini in late May puts Jupiter into the third house, which was called the joy of the moon, and a place that speaks to the environment. Well, the environment can be mental, physical, emotional, cultural. It can be like your neighborhood. It can be the like kin or brothers and sisters or cousins or people who are like family who grew up in the local neighborhood or the village that you live in, so to speak. So when Jupiter moves in there in a double-bodied air sign like Gemini, it speaks to a very busy and activated period of your life for the next year where, you know, the environment could be just bustling with new people, new ideas, learning new things. Again, skill development for Jupiter and Gemini is going to be a thing potentially for everybody, where knowledge, skills, technology, writing, thinking, learning can all be quite, they can be quite emphasized. And so I wonder if this isn't a year of learning and communicating, of teachers and teachings and exciting ideas. And it's a very busy and fun energy in the third house, just speaking to a kind of excitable and intellectual quality that's moving into your everyday environment to do some work in your life for the next year. So that's what I see for Aries. Alex, you want to add anything in there?
Yeah, I love all that. And I think, Jupiter and Gemini particularly, it's like experimentation with the environment. I think Geminis are remarkably experimental and a little bit like, and playful in a sense. And I think, maybe just because I'm strongly ruled by Jupiter, I realize that Jupiter is not always playful. It's sort of like we're trying to create a philosophy or a belief or you're always trying to synthesize. And Gemini's a little bit more, what the fuck? Why don't we
Yeah,
try this? Why don't we try that? Like, it's
for
not a big
sure.
deal. It doesn't have to be this like big ordered philosophy. We could just try something different, and I think that can actually be really fun. And I also think, for Aries in general, especially if you felt like, with all this action going on in your second house, if you felt like, you've been a little bit more secluded than you're normally used to with all these planets moving through your 12th house in March and April, there might be a sense with Mars moving into your first and then this sort of Venus moving into your second that it's really time to take action on behalf of your resource. There's
Right.
a sense where I'm coming out of a sort of feeling of being cloaked or needing a little bit more secluded interpersonal time to like, wow, you know what? I really feel like there's a whole new abundance that's possible in terms of my resources. And I feel much more capable or desiring to take action on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Nicely said. Yeah, that fits really well. And I just love what you said about Gemini, Jupiter and Gemini being sort of experimental as opposed to super systematic.
Yeah.
Um, it's willing to try different things or even hold seemingly contradictory ideas.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Let's move into Taurus, and I'll let you lead off on this one, and I'll just kind of highlight where we're looking here.
I think so. So here we've got for Taurus rising, we have this beautiful new moon happening in your first house. I would say that this is sort of a harmonizing of revolutionary reinventions that may have been going on for quite a while with Uranus moving through your first house, and maybe the whole way that you're conceiving of or making sense of yourself. I feel like Venus moving in here with this new moon is like there's a nice organic flow that starts to take place rather than sometimes I think when Uranus is present on its own, there's like a fits and starts or ideas that happen without feeling like there's a coherent way of putting them into action. I feel like with Venus coming into the sign, her home sign, the exalted the moon in its exaltation here for this new moon, there's a sense where it's like that nice, easy flow of spring begins to take over rather
Mm.
than feeling like, oh, like, I want to do this, but I want to do this, but I want to do this. And it's like, oh, now it feels like there's more of a harmony in this new sense of who I feel like I am. And then Jupiter Moving into your second house, Jupiter in the second house generally can speak well for resources, abundance, expansion of resources. It may ask you to think a little bit differently about your resources. Where if there's a sometimes I also notice with Gemini, like the twins play off of one another. There's been one twin that's been really active for a while. It's like, boom, it's got to be on the other foot. Like
Yep.
maybe there's like a, a way that you're thinking about resources, your own self-value or self-worth. It's like, I've been really considering them one way for a while. And it's like, oh, well, actually, you know what? They're going to shift over to this other way that could bring a greater sense of bounty and resource. It may involve with a planet in exile that you're doing something unfamiliar to the way that you're normally interacting with that area of your chart. But sometimes a little uncomfortable hard work in one of those in the other direction can bring some great results.
Yeah. That's nice. I was thinking about this. I mean, as a card-carrying Taurus rising member, I feel like there's if you've been experiencing incremental growth with Uranus in the first house, I think for Tauruses, we're about to hit a period where a lot of that growth, as you said, kind of congeals and then accelerates. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was a month for Tauruses where a lot of things that have happened over the past month or two, but also over the past years, even dating back to May of 2018 when Uranus first entered Taurus, don't sort of come together and then also maybe accelerate and take us into something pretty brand new. So I think it's a great month for Taurus risings to feel like there's some real development happening. There is a little touch of that death and rebirth in the first house this month with Jupiter going through the transformation. So that's interesting. That could be a little difficult. Like it strikes me as not all revolution is easy. Like personal transformation, this looks pretty supported, like overall I like it, but just there's maybe a continued reordering of some kind on the level of identity, health, body. But then Jupiter moving into the second to me really resembles the possibility for like multiple new streams of income or development of multiple new skills or assets or resources that can become more abundant. Also, the potential to be nickeled and dimed through lots of expenditures that start coming up.
Sure.
To invest in something, though, that it represents a long-term resource, to start investing in something that you're trying to develop or cultivate. And I like this as a time that's pretty fruitful for Tauruses around career and money, because Jupiter's going to trine Pluto in the 10th house. So some kind of revising or shifting of finances and work related material coming pretty soon for Tauruses.
Amen.
All right, let's go to Gemini. So 12th house and Jupiter moving into the first. I think this is fantastic for Geminis because we have this rebirthing scenario of Jupiter moving from the 12th into the first, from a place that's relatively unseen or that could be more unconscious into a place that's it's much more consciously accessible and felt. And it's happening right after the Cazimi with the sun, where Jupiter's going through this kind of rebirthing. So moving from the 12th to the 1st in late May at that time, for me, suggests that Geminis are coming into a very fruitful period, having gone through some unconscious revolution, which means that you're at this turning point the past couple of months where, the seeds of revolution in the unconscious are starting to sprout up. And then because you're going to be in more of a conscious relationship with them, the next new moon cycle will be in your sign with Venus in that sign, with Jupiter in that sign, the sun in that sign, obviously the sun and moon together. I just feel like when you have the kind of revolution indicated by Jupiter and Uranus, but it's in the 12th house in a place that's hard to see, but then within a couple of moon cycles like we're looking at right now, it's all moving into the first. You're going to be in conscious awareness of what's been going on and able to really make changes proactively. Or maybe you've been able to integrate unconscious material and now you're ready to take off with new confidence or better self-esteem. because you've looked at things that were difficult within yourself and incorporated them, made peace with them, healed them. So I really like the kind of 12th to 1st transition that Geminis are going through. Not to mention that I feel like Gemini or Jupiter in Gemini in the 1st house can be a year where you're just gaining understanding, wisdom, and confidence overall, which could translate into a lot of different areas in the next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think this strikes me as something, and I've been considering a lot about, the 12th house being the sort of the aspect of the personality we often can't see or aren't aware of. And, I wonder if, Jupiter moving into your 1st house as a Gemini rising can be a proliferation of possibilities, ideas, mental activity, um, idea after idea after idea after idea. And I feel like with this new moon preceding the entrance of Jupiter into your 1st house, I think that will not feel as overwhelming if there's this sense of I'm aware of and integrating a place in my psyche that feels stable, that feels like ground, that feels like it is. There's a place there's like a bedrock that supports this proliferation, and that could actually be a really fun and experimental and amazing time with just like, again, seeing what Jupiter does to help you reintegrate some of these ideas that are coming up into a sort of stream of consciousness that moves you in one direction, because it comes from this place of stability in the 12th, that recreated stability in the 12th house, or at least having access to that part of the psyche in a more emphasized way.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm going to move us forward here to Cancer and let you lead us off on this one, and I'll highlight for you.
Awesome. So we have, for Cancer rising, we have the new moon in Taurus in your 11th house, in Jupiter present in its joy, Venus in her rulership. I mean, this just looks to me on the surface, Astrology 101, of great benefits coming to you through groups and allies, people who really want to support you, who have a belief in what you're doing, are sort of invested in what you're doing, want to prop up your career and how you're seen, or just how you're seen in the world. There might also, with Mars just moving through the very top of your chart, be a real desire to take some serious action, to take some leadership action or some executive action on, with the great, bountiful support of others. And then you have Jupiter moving into your 12th house. This is interesting to me. It's like, I would be really aware of places in your unconscious that have felt like there's a dualism that sort of maybe paralyzes you sometimes. It's something I've observed with Geminis, where they get there's so many choices, and they go back and forth so quickly between two choices that it almost is like a short circuit. And it's just like a brain freeze. And it's like, I just can't process this right now. And I feel like Jupiter coming in here might be a slow process over the next year of integrating opposites, or at least being able to feel like you can hold opposites in your subconscious without feeling like it has to generate this a choice between the two. And I think that's one of Jupiter's great strengths. That unifying synthesis of Jupiter could be really helpful here.
Yeah, absolutely. I do like one thing that I've been doing a lot of work on a talk that I'm doing in June on the 12th house. And what I've really been looking at is how to relate the archetypes of the rising sign with the 12th house sign for every rising sign. And when it comes to Cancer rising, you think of someone who's really leading from that space of emotional bondedness with other people, emotional security, vulnerability, safety, sweetness, nostalgia, romance. It is not as easy for Cancer to access the psychological qualities of Gemini, if you kind of think about it that way. Like the ascendant is going to be like our personal psychological qualities. The 12th house is going to be somewhat inaccessible to us. So for Cancers, one thing that I really like is that this is a year that is going to force you to have to learn how to think rationally and do some compartmentalizing between the rational and the emotional. And that's not an easy space, but it's a healing space if you move into it. It's going to be, for example, when someone I always think about it in terms of, like my kids. They're making a request, and on the rational level, it like makes a certain kind of sense, but on the emotional level, I know exactly where they're coming from, like, and so I'm like, oh, it sounds to me like you're just trying to stay up late, although this is a very rational request for some like lotion or something. Like my arm itches. Can you get me some lotion? I can hear what you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think like it's just that combination of rational and emotional and trying to work the two together that I feel like is going to be the evolutionary chore, you might say, for cancers in the year ahead.
Really interesting way to look at it. I love that. Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course, there continues to be all of this activity in their 11th house too, which I think you already spoke to, but I mean, just continued development of friends, allies, groups, and
Yeah.
some real openings happening there. My wife's a Cancer rising, and she was invited over the past month as Jupiter Uranus got together to speak at like three different, oh shoot, no, nurseries, like
Mm.
plant nurseries, because she's an
Mhm.
herbalist. And like she met like, hundreds of people at these events and is starting to make inroads in the local herbal community. I'm like, that's so in line with being an
Exactly.
11th house as a Cancer, all this in the 11th house is Cancer rising right now. So I think there's a lot of openings there for people that'll keep, sort of flowering open to
Mhm.
borrow that image. But yeah, let's go
Aries.
forward to Leo. Um, okay, so Leo, and this is Alex. This is Alex's Leo
Give me my
rising.
reading, Adam. I'm ready for my reading. Thank you.
Right? Yeah, I mean, first of all, again, like if you've been waiting for your career to blow up, I really do feel like, first of all, you have to remember that Jupiter Uranus conjunctions don't express themselves on the day of, and they don't express themselves even in the month of. You have to look back at previous Jupiter Uranus conjunctions historically and note how it's like a gong, and the sound waves ripple out over time. In a year from now, most Leo risings are going to go, holy shit, look at all that's happened in the past year in my career. Or if you're retired or you don't yet have a career, in the things that are shaping the trajectory of your career at a young age, or maybe those things that constitute your public, social, civic engagement in retirement. But either way, there's such a revolution happening there. This month, you might start to actually see some momentum if you haven't seen any big events already. The other thing that's interesting is that what seems to come with this, as Jupiter's being reborn and moving into your 11th house, are like a bevy of new social connections. It's like an apiary. There's just busy bee energy entering the house of allies, friends, community. And I think for Leos, there's going to be a lot of different inroads. The most important thing in my uh, estimation for Leos, and I'm just going to throw in something. You had that eclipse in your 9th house. Gemini in the 11th can bring a lot of different connections, but for Leos, it's not the right connection unless it's a heart connection. It has to
Amen.
really like light you up on the heart level and feel like, oh, my whole heart can come on board for this. And that's sort of connected to that 9th house sense of where are your convictions at right now?
Yeah.
Like where are your beliefs? And there's experimentation in the air, and I think there's going to be some discernment in the year ahead needed to sort of pick through the different connections and possibilities and opportunities and people and groups and go like, some of these are fun and some of them are right and fun and some of them are fun and not right. Like something like
Amen. Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I resonate with that. I totally resonate with that. I think that what's interesting about you were saying this previous Jupiter Uranus cycle. So just putting in perspective for Leo risings, that this cycle, the previous cycle began around 2010 to 2011 at the very end of Pisces in our 8th house, and it was an exploration of the revolution of the emotional spiritual world, the re-understanding of a whole new dimension of being, which really transpired for me at least over the last 14 years. Now I feel like, so what's interesting about that is that there's a sense now of, with this new conjunction of like that, whatever was discovered in those previous 14 years of Jupiter Uranus is now coming into a tangible form and career. It's like, now how do I implement this in a way that is practical and stable and that provides me with some amount of liftoff? or that just starts to happen in of itself. And I think, I definitely feel that with Jupiter and Gemini, Adam, because um, Jupiter and Gemini in the 11th house can be like people and connections and stuff that is just coming to
Mm.
you, and you've got to sort. Virgo, Mercury's other sign, is really good at sorting and organizing. Gemini is like, this is cool, this is fun, this is fun, this is fun, this is fun. Let's just do this. And I think that the sort of Jupiter slash ninth house discernment here, again, is this in line with my values? Does it have meaning? And is it in line with my values and the meaning that I want to create in the world? The feeling that I'm creating from myself and my own unique sense of who I am. Really, really important as we go forward with this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I also I feel like there's some really similar takes we're going to get to when we get to Aquarius, the opposite sign. The different areas of the chart, but there's some similar things. Anyway, let's go to Virgo, and you're up on Virgo. Sorry.
So Virgos, this is interesting, actually. I'm wondering. So this new moon is taking place in your ninth house. A more sort of practical, tangible aspect of this could be, going abroad, living in a foreign country. This is the ninth house, is related to foreign travel, or benefits or blessings that sort of come from overseas, or by taking a job or a post overseas in some way. But I also see it as like I think for Virgos and Mercury ruled signs, it's the analyzed facts that can be very, very important, and drilling down on them for Virgos particularly. And I'm wondering, with a Venus ruled sign in your ninth house with a major transformation going on there, if there's something about like, but is what I believe, is how I make sense of the world, does it have some sort of aesthetic feeling to it? Does it have a feel of flow and beauty, and does it have a sense of sensualness to it, and allowing? And I think for Virgos, that's really, really important, is the ability to let go into the goddess, so to speak, and allow
Nice.
the goddess to sort of take you in your belief system. Then you got Jupiter moving into your 10th house, which could just be an incredible amount of fun, interesting, maybe slightly different than you're used to opportunities in career. And I think that, as a Virgo rising, and I was actually just talking about this a few days ago with a client, had this similar configuration, this idea of taking all those ideas and organizing them. So it feels manageable to you. And because I think sometimes for Virgos, it's like when things feel chaotic or out of control, it's like, whoa, I got to just clamp down on everything. But saying like, you know what, it's safe to experiment with these ideas. It's safe to know where they go, to see where some, or at least investigate them, but sort of categorizing them in a way that feels like you've got your proverbial spreadsheet in order will feel really helpful when it comes to career.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking about this on the level of my 8-year-old daughter, and how, as Jupiter and Uranus conjoined, we had this massive discussion about magic in our house, because she got like a kid's spell book and tried to cast a spell to turn herself into a mermaid, and it didn't work. So she was like, legitimately, Dad, you do magical stuff like predict the future. This is an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd be able to like turn myself into a mermaid. Is this all a crock of shit? Like, what's going on? That was like her 8-year-old version.
A mermaid. Why am I not a mermaid now?
Exactly, dude. He was really intense about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we need to have like a discussion about magic. And what was really cool was that I ended up talking to her about the archetype of a mermaid, and like what else could becoming a mermaid mean. And I also said, you never like she was like, does this mean they don't exist? And I was like, well, I haven't seen one, but listen, the ocean's pretty deep. I was like, I don't know, so keeping that magic open, keeping the wonder and but what I was really, really aware of is, here's my Virgo rising daughter going through her first sort of intellectual and spiritual revolution. Like, she was, when I tried to explain to her some of this stuff, she was like confounded, and that Jupiter Uranus too. It's like there's something confounding about what you're being asked to consider or think, or how your beliefs are changing, or your philosophy. But you're trying to figure out like what's real. And especially with Taurus too, it's like the first thing that I was like, the hardest thing about that conversation was explaining to my daughter that that book can be magic, and this little spell book, and there can be elements of it that are make believe. And that like like Santa Claus isn't just real or fake. We're going to take that dichotomy, put it on the shelf, and think about this in a different way, right? That's the kind of conversation she's ready to have. This was completely mind-blowing for her to think that I was like, well, there's a way in which Santa is very real, and the archetype of Santa. And we're like going into this kind of conversation. But I mean, if you project that out into the life of someone who's 30 or 40 or 50, you should be seeing things that are just as like revolutionary on the level of philosophy or thought or mind or religion or spirituality. So anyway, but even at 8, Jupiter moving into the 10th house for me is interesting, because I would see this as a time where the orders or structures, because Jupiter does bring order and coherence, the orders and structures in your career are ready to change. And you don't think about Jupiter as bringing, like, people always make the mistake of thinking that Jupiter in my 10th house means I'm about to hit the jackpot. And quite frequently what it means is something close to what you said, where you're like, no, it's not that you're going to hit the jackpot. It's that you're going to have to organize your entire business, spreadsheets, databases, procedures, protocols. You're going to have to create order and coherence in your career. That's just as likely for Jupiter in the 10th house for many people. Jupiter in the 10th house for a lot of people will be a sign that they'll be in management, because they are the order creator. So looking at organization and how you organize lots of different parts of yourself in terms of your interests or your activities in your career could be a thing too.
Agreed. I love that story about your daughter, by the way. That's beautiful. It's coming out of that sort of the literal magical thinking, right? This A leads to B into like a much bigger world for her. You know, that's amazing.
Yeah, like I could go on and on about it, and I'm not going to, because I can hear myself. We'll be here for 2 hours. But I mean, like it's what we're just like. Jupiter and Gemini is going to bring so much more of that. It's such a childlike placement of wonder and magic too. Like I really think of Jupiter and Gemini very much like the magician card in the tarot. There's there's pulling rabbits out of hat. Is that a trick? Is that an illusion? And then there's also like true wonder and Hermes, like the magic of Hermes. And he's legit. He came up with astrology, you know? So
right.
Okay. Let's go on to Libra, and I am going to highlight here the 8th house with Jupiter moving into the 9th. So Jupiter moving into Gemini in the 9th house for Librans suggests a year where, again, there's going to be the need to create maybe some level of order from chaos with respect to beliefs, ideas, thoughts, learning, education, teachers, religion, spirituality, or there's going to be a period of playful experimentation and consideration of options and different kinds of ideas and thoughts, systems of knowledge. And that's a really exciting thing. It trines your ascendant. This is going to be, it's like you're due for a season of self-reflection, and it in that self-reflection being intimately tied to ideas, thoughts, beliefs, etc. Now, coming out of the 8th house, so much energy in the 8th house. We also know that for Libras, there's themes of death and rebirth, that there are themes of soul contracts and agreements and debts that people owe to you or that you owe to other people being cleared. And the openings that come out of those spaces can be really profound. And there's been some promise of that the last couple of months, but now you're going to see it accelerate this month.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I was thinking about that 9th house. It's so interesting with Libra risings having Gemini in their 9th house. You know, I think sometimes having a Libra moon, I can speak to that idea of like, well, there's this and there's this, and it's, you know, you can always see both sides, and there's always, and Gemini in the 9th would speak to that way of seeing and ordering the world. I wonder if Jupiter comes into the 9th house and is asking for, yes, you can see both sides of something, but like, can you create a coherent way of bringing those two opposites together, or holding them, or recognizing that sometimes it's not this and that, it's just that, or it's just this. There's a way of sort of, I'm committing myself to a philosophy that feels a little bit more integrated, or feels like it gives me some sense of like drawing two sides of a coin together into something that
Yes.
feels like more unified together, unified, and
Yeah.
that new moon in the eighth house, again, on a practical astrology level, maybe that's, blessings and benefits and new resources coming from others, or if you're in a significant relationship with your partner. And it can also be, it really figuring out like what are the deeper interconnections that are really stable and generative, and what are the ones that are not. And I feel like
Hmm.
with this new moon, this is more of like, wow, I'm really recognizing there are some deep interrelations with others that are very emotionally based, that are really important and really beautiful. I see more of that side of it with this new moon.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I like that. It's an interesting thing about Jupiter and Gemini that it's bringing this to my mind, which is just that if you think about Jupiter alone, Jupiter is like, we need a legal system, we need a traffic system, we need an educational system, we need governments, and we need astrology in the sense of there being some evidence of a well-ordered cosmos,
Mhm,
and the musical scale and math, and like all of these are
mhm,
so Jupiterian. Um, and I feel like Mercury is really interesting because where Jupiter in the courtroom of the cosmos is like, uh, you've committed a crime and you've been virtuous, and that's very
mhm,
much like Jupiter.
mhm.
Mercury is more like Mercury's more like the awareness that says, actually, the entire universe fundamentally exists and operates the way it does because of the balance of light and dark and the
Yeah,
interplay of light and dark. And it's Mercury's much less inclined to judge or call someone a criminal and someone else virtuous. They'll sort of
yeah,
flip things, Mercury will sort of flip things on its head and be like, well, actually, the thief stole things for a really interesting reason, and the virtuous person's kind of a hypocrite.
yeah.
It
Right.
just so it's interesting that Librans, who tend to have a very conservative and sort of traditional view of justice and fairness and
Mhm,
balance, could
mhm.
also be going into a phase where a lot of they're being asked to think in more open-minded and mercurial ways about things, seeing opposites in ways that sort of flip established like virtue hierarchies. So you
100%.
have to remember, like Libra is like the exaltation of Saturn, right, and Venus, and Librans are not stupid by any means. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that Librans have a slightly more like level, traditional way of evaluating things. They go by the book, so to speak.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
Mercury in the ninth house is like, here, I'm going to give you a book. It's the Book of Hermes. Read this one, and
Yeah.
it's like reading the Tao Te Ching or something.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
well, let's move to Scorpio, and I'll hand this one
Uh,
over to you. We've got everything in the seventh with Jupiter rolling into the eighth.
wow, okay, so we got this beautiful new moon happening in your seventh house. We'll take some of the, the technical astrology possibilities for this first. This can be revolutions coming to fruition in relationships, usually positive with the both benefics present. Maybe, the final dissolution of one particular belief system, with Jupiter going under the beams now this month, dissolution of one particular belief system about relationships, or one way you've ordered them in favor of another way you've ordered relationship. um I think, it's interesting for Scorpios too. I think that there's a permission here in this new moon, and it's a little bit in my intuition coming into the astrology of like a little what I said for Virgos, a bit an ability to let go a little bit into relationship, to trust when someone else has the ball, that they can do okay. They'll
Mm.
be okay if they have it. And I think that, Scorpios oftentimes like to just be like, but I have the ball and it is only me.
For
Only
sure.
I can throw the ring into the volcano. It is only I. It's like, well, Sam did something there too. You needed another person there to get it over the finish line, man.
That's
Um,
right.
so I think that's an interesting possibility for Scorpios this month. And you have Jupiter moving into your eighth house in Gemini, which, you know, may ask for a slightly more lighthearted approach to the deeper interrelations with others. I think, it might be a little bit like, I have dwelled on something for a long time with someone else, and the best way forward for me is to just release it, or to let it go, or to allow, literally I could just see the Gemini, the breeze blowing. It's just like, I will just let this flow out in the breeze. It's not particularly comfortable or easy sometimes for Scorpio, but I think this month may ask some ideas that might feel counter to the nature of the chart with the Scorpio rising, but could ultimately feel very freeing and very liberating, following what the transits are asking.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously, you think about how relationships are changing and evolving for Scorpios right now.
Yeah.
I also think broadly about the pleasure of the principle of pleasure,
Mm,
and that the seventh house was called Kama by Indian astrologers, like as in the Kama Sutra, and this place where it's not easy for Scorpios to imagine a world in which things are easy, stable, light, peaceful, happy, fluid, harmonious. It's
mhm.
not that Scorpios are like anti happiness or peacefulness or stability.
Sure.
It's that the natural quality of Scorpio is, it's much more autumnal. So it's like I'm more in touch with death and loss and grief and instability and deterioration or destruction, and I abide in that space psychically. Well, if you have this kind of energy pushing through the seventh, maybe things could be a little bit easier. Doesn't mean you have to
Mhm,
lose your edge. Doesn't mean that
mhm,
you have that any depth is lost, or that there's a sacrifice of anything authentic, which are often the suspicions for Scorpios when
mhm,
it comes to Taurus. But actually, maybe things just get a little lighter and easier, and you still get to keep all the deep, profound pieces of yourself.
mm,
And then I also wonder about, um, you know, when Jupiter moves into the eighth house, I also start thinking about the ways in which soul contracts and relationships with other people start to bear fruit.
mm,
Um, whether that's a spouse gets a raise, and all of a sudden you're in receipt of the good fortune of someone that's in your life, right? Or there's people coming into your life that are beneficial. Jupiter tends to bring positive blessings in the form of soul contracts with people that help grant greater order or coherence in our life. That's where that sense of blessing comes from. But there's an exchange that has to happen, and
mhm.
Scorpios may have to be discerning about some of that too.
Agreed. Agreed. Beautiful.
All right, let's go to Sag. So for Sag, we're looking at sixth house with Jupiter moving into the seventh. I'm just going to back this up one day. There we go. So this one is, to me, is fascinating because I will say that the sixth, trying to understand what a revolution in the sixth house looks like is not, it's not easy.
Mhm,
But what I would relate it to is runner's high. And people know this, like if you on a treadmill, or if you run outside, or if you use an elliptical or a stair climber, any kind of cardio, for the first portion of your workout, you're laboring. Same thing with the yoga classroom. Your
mhm, mhm,
breath, you're just like trying to get into it. And
mhm.
then all of a sudden, after your body hits this breakthrough where what it's been laboring with is now a source of joy. Like,
I love
oh
that.
my, look, my breath is starting to
Amen.
feel like I'm on the world's most natural, greatest drug.
Mhm,
And the same thing in cardio. If you're running, runners talk about this. It happens to me at the gym on the elliptical. I'm getting sort,
mhm,
and all of a sudden I'll be like, this isn't hard anymore, and I could do this forever. Of course, that doesn't last,
mhm.
right? But I think of that as what's happening for Sagittarius right now in the sixth.
Mm,
The potential for a breakthrough with something that you have been laboring with, or even suffering from, like a therapy that comes about and helps you where there's been chronic pain or something that's been nagging, and suddenly you find something that treats it and there's a breakthrough. But something that you've been working towards, suffering with, sacrificing on behalf of, it's been chop wood, carry water. There's been a kind of labored quality to it. Even if you're in some kind of learning process and it's just been a lot of sacrifice to learn what you want to learn, now there's some momentum being gained. and there's a
Mhm.
breakthrough happening.
Mhm.
And then when I think about Jupiter moving into the seventh, I think about there also being a lightness and like I could almost see this as like your mind and heart being open to new people, thoughts, or ideas. Often for Sages, and I don't mean any offense by this to Sages, because my mom's a Sag rising. There's a lot of people, and I know a lot love Sages. My daughter's a Sagittarius sun. Sages sometimes, for as free spirited as they are, they're not necessarily open minded.
Yes,
Do you know what
says
I'm
the
talking
Sag
about?
Sun. Oh, I know this one intimately. I've been called out
Okay.
on it many times. Yep,
And
yep,
I don't mean any offense
yep.
by it, because
Oh
every
no.
sign has their thing, you know? But like, what I think is really interesting is that if you think, like, one of the things that people frequently misunderstand about Sag is that Sag is such a warrior sign.
Yeah.
It was associated with the running of marathons, Sagittarius was, and centaurs. Although we always cite Chiron as like this master healer, like, oh yeah, but he also taught the art of war.
Right.
And like he also, like, centaurs were generally speaking like valiant and sort of psychotic warriors.
Right.
And so there's this quality in Sagittarius that can be like very competitive and driven. And you don't think of the centaur as like holding a spear, but it sort of is, or a bow and arrow, but it's a weapon. And my point is that the sixth house for Sag is often a place where, because Taurus is there, you're working with the archetype of peacefulness, ease, and stability in a house that is about difficulty and arduous things that you work and suffer for, which I think Sages are naturally very good at.
Mhm.
Um, as much as they're freedom loving, if Sages care about something, they will compete. They will run the whole marathon. Incredible in that way, the endurance that they have as fire signs. But what I'm saying is that you could see how this period of a breakthrough in the Venusian sixth house for Sages could then lead into a space with Jupiter moving into the seventh in Gemini that's more about lighthearted, carefree, experimental, open-minded receptivity to other people. It's like,
Mhm.
when you have a breakthrough, one of the things that often happens when you're a Sag is suddenly you allow yourself to consider new people, places, things, ideas, and it doesn't have to be an affront to your doctrine or your teaching or your belief, which is a very convicted thing for Sages. So I just see this as a process that could lead to like a tremendously open-minded kind of free, a free-spirited place, but one that's a little bit more Gemini for Sages.
I don't even know what to say to that's fucking awesome. That's just beautifully said. And, I was reflecting on with my very own Gemini downstairs, who, for the Sagittarius in the relationship, every once in a while will just gently put his hand on my forearm and say, "Baby, we're gonna do this differently, and it'll be okay.
That's
And
funny.
we're gonna be flexible, and it'll be okay." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, it will." And I just need the reminder, and then I'm fine.
Yep.
But you
Yep.
don't realize, sometimes you just get that order and that story that you create as Jupiter, and you create it in your mind. Therefore, it must be real in the entire world.
Yeah.
And you go, oh yeah, there's a total other way of doing this. Holy
Yeah.
shit! It's just like, and that can be really fun. I think that when Jupiter moves into
Mhm.
the seventh house here in Gemini, it's just like, wow, what a breath of fresh air. Because sometimes I know as a Sagittarius, we tell ourselves wonderful stories. We can create wonderful stories. We can create wonderful narratives and philosophies, but they can also become very stuck with them and wedded
Yep.
to them. And there's just like, wow, you try it a whole different way. And I think, I was just reflecting on, my newsletter I sent out about Chiron for the eclipse. The picture was him teaching Achilles archery. There's a real sense of the like you're saying, the warrior spirit here, but also like the warrior of like, what am I fighting for that's meaningful, beautiful, stable, generative, where I can also land in the sixth house, right? I might have had a fight for somewhere where now I can finally land. I can relax. I can be in this nice organic space of Taurus and just feel like I can be stable there.
Yeah.
Now I
Yeah.
feel good. Yeah.
Well, a romp for Sagittarius. That was fun. I'll pass the ball over to your
Oh,
court and your side of the court, and we'll go look at Capricorn rising.
this is so interesting. So for Capricorn rises, you have this beautiful new moon in your fifth house. The revolution for Capricorn rising in the fifth house might be it is perfectly acceptable for you to have things in your life that are personally pleasurable to you.
Yeah.
Just for you. And it could be anything. But,
Mm.
I've been reflecting a lot about what revolution in each house in Taurus means. And I feel like sometimes, for Capricorn, it's the sake of the responsible thing, the achievement, the
Mm.
carrying my bag of responsibilities up the hill. And this might be like, the revolution is I just get to do things that are creatively, pleasurably interesting and fun, and give my soul a sense of like generation and life. And it's okay. It's
Yep.
perfectly okay to do that. And you get Jupiter moving into the 6th house in Gemini, which is, maybe a little bit of, I have to sacrifice on behalf of what I believe about that. The 6th house, I think, with Jupiter is interesting, where it's just like there's some amount of giving, sacrificing one point of view in favor of the other, which may not
Mm.
feel entirely comfortable in with Gemini. It's like I have to sacrifice this one way I thought about things in order to move over to the other twin, and I might have to fight a little bit for it, or I might have to do some work around it, and it might not be entirely comfortable to the archetype. But again, on the other side of that, over the course of this year while Jupiter is there, it could have a remarkably it could bring some really unanticipated beneficial results, especially as Jupiter moves up into Cancer in 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you said for Caps about the revolution of pleasure. And
Yeah.
another thing that comes to my mind is like creative satisfaction. Like, are
Yeah.
you creating the story of your life in a way that makes you feel satisfied? That is not the same as saying, is everything going right in your life? Because like, I mean,
Yeah.
who does that ever happen for?
Right.
But I think the Venusian, we have to think about Venus in the ancient world, and she was a goddess that was associated with things being harmonized. But the thing we forget about harmony, which you know very well since you have background in music, is that harmony is really about taking different things and bringing them together in a way that is appealing or beautiful, enjoyable, it. And really, in the history of like jazz music and blues music, so much of what makes that music beautiful is taking things that sound sort of discordant, and if you
Exactly.
relate it to the next note in the right way, the discordant thing makes total sense.
Yep.
And so I don't think that we're talking about like, oh, Capricorn, like, if you're not figuring out how to be perfectly happy, then you're just a dull Saturnian bore. It's more like, are you able to take elements of light and dark and put them together in a way that feels creatively satisfying in your life? That's what comes to my mind with that kind of breakthrough there. It doesn't have to be perfect, but can you harmonize like the stuff that's difficult with other things to make something that's enjoyable?
Mm.
And then when I think about Jupiter entering the 6th house, I also think about the challenge of being open-minded. Um,
Mm.
it's like there's
Love
this
that.
thing that I read recently about Capricorns, Alex, where it was like, in the ancient world, one of one of the understandings of Capricorn in the sea goat image was that goats were considered escape artists. Like, goats are notorious for being able to escape things and get
Mhm.
out of things, and even in climbing, like mountain goats.
Mhm.
And they can. Have you ever seen those where they're like, just what are they even standing on? They're like pressed flat against
I
a
know. Yeah.
90-degree angle.
Yeah.
So, but they were saying like Capricorn is the gateway of the gods, and it's where the sun starts to rise and the light starts to escape darkness. It has to
Mhm.
climb up, and so it's an escape artist, and that can be applied to the pursuit from lowly conditions of great power and success, right? Like Capricorns work their way up hierarchies in the
Mhm.
material sense, but also spiritually. They like to transcend. And so the sign of Saturn, this earthly sign of Saturn, is in some ways about transcendence of the world.
Mhm.
And I think that's also why, for example, people like Tolkien, who had Capricorn energy in his 5th house, wrote about the subjects that he wrote about.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
anyway, my long-winded point here is just that when you see Capricorns constantly thinking about how can I transcend? How can I move up and out of the water to the top of the mountain? How can I get to the top of the hierarchy? Or how do I go from this condition up to some other condition? So much of that is going to be hindered by an inability to keep an open mind.
Yep.
Like Capricorns, one of the easiest ways to get a goat stuck is for them to fall into the stubborn old goat syndrome.
Yep.
Well, Jupiter in the 6th house is a great year for becoming experimental with your thoughts and your ideas and your plans and your attitudes. And that could actually help you achieve your goals. But the actual labor or difficulty of it might be that being open-minded is not necessarily second nature for Capricorns who get a little singular in their focus on, I mean, they can pursue anything with that singular focus and achieve it in a way that's really rare and special. But sometimes they get stuck because they're so stubborn and not open-minded. So I wonder about that kind of karma coming up in the year ahead for Capricorn risings.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think it's also, when you were saying about the light and dark, what makes Capricorn so funny. I think Capricorns are hilarious.
Yeah,
that
totally.
Snarky kind of just like, well, that sucked. It's just kind of like really like dark, kind of like.
Well, it reminds me of like, there's a way in which Capricorns see the world where it's like they have that witty, cynical, like Louis C.K. is in term. Well, I know he got into a whole bunch of trouble, but he, his humor back in the day when I was first getting into him and he had not yet fallen or whatever, but he has that like cynical perspective that's like, yeah, we're all just crabs in the bucket trying to get out, and don't tell me you're anything different. Your shit does not smell any different than anyone else's. And that kind of view behind everything that is there in terms of how he finds humor in ordinary events, like people complaining on an airplane that the Wi-Fi is not working when they didn't even know airplanes had Wi-Fi 10 minutes ago, like he just has this view of humans as like all stuck in the same situation. We're all trying to get out of the same situation. I think that kind of it's just a devilish kind of humor in Capricorn that's kind of dark, but like really true.
Agreed.
Anyway, I'm getting so sidetracked today. I'm sorry. All right. So anyway, let's get into the next.
That's part of the here.
I know. I'm trying to make sure I know you have something to. We have only a little bit of time left.
We're good.
Okay. Aquarius rising. Look, we've got this whole congregation of planets in Taurus in your 4th house of Jupiter moving into the 5th. I really like this one in terms of there being, just this quality of revolution at the roots. So we were talking, I said earlier when we were talking about Leo, it's like an inverted version of what's happening for the Leos. You think about the base of operations in the 4th house. You're thinking about things like your home, your bedroom, your living room, maybe your family. But it's the place in your life, whether it's psychological or physical, that you go to for the sake of release from the world. Indian astrologers called that house moksha. So release. The kind of revolution that Taurus in the 4th house is looking for is 2 things. It is a release, but it's release for airy Aquarians into the body. So you think about the earth, the Venus energy, the sensual qualities. Aquarians need to let go of ideology with respect to this particular transit. Let go of ideology, let go of ideas about yourself, let go of ideas about the world and others, and thought structures and paradigms and philosophies. Put the blueprints away and try to get into being an animal, like your animal body. And that's the revolution that I really see here for Aquarians. What 100%. I find really, and what I find interesting is that then Jupiter's movement into the 5th, coming off from that revolution, could actually bring more like, okay, if you can get into the body in the right way and create this kind of revolution around the roots of your life, what can it open up with respect to the level of fun, play, creativity? Hi, Summer. There's my daughter. There's the 5th house right there. How are you?
What did you guys talk about with you?
Well, I don't know. Hold on just a second. You
Sure,
want to
sure.
take over for a second?
Yeah, yeah. So, I think that there is, this is just so cute. I can barely take it. So, for Aquarians, and I find this with Aquarius risings very often. And I've seen it with Aquarius in my life. There is such a way we stay within the mind and the way we're thinking and conceptualizing, and w- and it's now you're coming down into a private space that is a little bit more. It's Venus in the private space of your life, the sensual, the body, the space of being embodied in an Earth sign. Isn't she an Aquarius rising, by the way?
She is an Aquarius rising. Isn't that
So funny.
crazy?
The synchronicity of that. I was thinking that I'm like, wait a second, she's an Aquarius rising. She just went
Yeah.
felt it in the force, the
I know.
tremor in
It's
the
really,
force.
yeah, totally.
But I was thinking about, like, for Aquarians, like there's this sense of being in systems of thought and blueprints, and and I still love galaxy brain. I use this sometimes. You say, like, there's everything has its order and how it's connected, but it's all very cerebral in a lot of ways. But the private space of your life in Taurus is getting a rebirth in a way where maybe a place to sort of relax all of that mental energy and all of that conceptualization is just in the soft animal of your body, as Mary
Mm,
Oliver says, is just to
yeah.
be in a comfortable, sensual, beautiful private space at the end of the day that allows all of that incredible mental activity to have a little place to reset.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really important. Yeah.
And what leads from that, as I was going to say, is Jupiter in the fifth,
Yeah.
trining the Pluto in the first, can then actually lead to ideas that help you free up and become more playful. Jupiter and Gemini in the fifth is a very playful mental space relative to the heavier, kind of weightier gravitas of Aquarius and
Yeah.
Pluto in Aquarius, right? So I feel like this place of revolution in the fourth leads to like a lightening of spirit and mind with Gemini, Jupiter and Gemini in the fifth. And that's just so funny because I was like, it's the place of children and it's the place
Yeah.
of creative lightness. And in walks my Aquarius rising daughter.
That's amazing. I love seeing that.
Yeah, that was such a cool
I love seeing
synchronicity.
that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So
Pisces.
Pisces, last but not least.
For Pisces, kind of along the lines of what I was just saying, if your environment around you, what surrounds you, does it feel grounded, practical, beautiful? I think Pisces, what I see here in the third house is like the sort of the everyday mind, and which can be your subconscious mind, the things and then what spans out from that is usually the things that surround us in our everyday lives, the sort of stuff we don't take notice of. Like, really bringing a sense of, maybe the revolution here is like, my environment now feels beautiful and
Mm,
stable. It feels organic. It feels grounding. And I think that, and with Saturn, especially moving through your first house, there can be a place where it's very difficult for Pisces to feel like, wow, there's a boundaried place where I can just feel like an incarnated separate being, and that's okay.
mhm.
And I think that kind of goes co-present with Saturn in the first, the structure. But then you have Jupiter moving into the fourth house, which, I mean, I could just, again, practical astrology 101 could be a bevy of places to move to. Maybe you have the itch to move or change location. It's like, wow, this all of a sudden, I never thought that I could live in Alaska. I never thought I could live in Spain. I never thought I could live in Italy, right? But there's this sort of ideas or experimentation of like, well, where do I want the base of my life to be? And is
Mm,
it possible to have some fun with at least the ideas about, like, where would I create great order in my life that might be out of the box of, like, where I feel sort of safe and contained,
yep.
into a place that feels just really fun and
Yeah.
never considered.
Right. Yeah. That I was thinking about the idea that things for like look for Pisceans, I kind of got to start with the fact that you've got Saturn traveling through your first.
Yeah.
And it's in Pisces, which is Jupiter's sign. So the Jupiter Uranus conjunction to me signifies something in the environment changing that has such a deep personal impact on Pisces right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the Saturn in the first is like, who am I? It's very existential. It can be a little melancholic. It's trying to figure out your yes through your no's. It's trying to move forward with an understanding of your limitations. It's all like that. It's kind of heavy. So I love that Jupiter, the ruler, goes through this revolution in Taurus, which to me is sort of like saying, in order for me to change in the way that is, this kind of serious, more existential change that I'm trying to create, Saturn in my first house, I have to shift something in the environment around me.
Yeah.
I mean, to use like a simple image, it's sort of like, unless I repaint this bedroom, I'm going to die.
Exactly.
It's like that kind of drama. You got to rearrange the living room or whatever.
Yeah.
Something in the environment is leading to, personal change is leading to environmental change. And then this starts opening up a lot of possibilities around home, around family, around living environment, or around how you seek and find release again from the world and even from yourself. How do we take a break from our own heaviness? Even when the heaviness is like meaningful and good, you still need to take breaks from it. Jupiter over the course of the next year will be squaring Saturn as its ruler. The Jupiter Saturn square here, I think, has to do with, okay, who are you becoming? And can you become someone that's lighter and more liberated and free? And that's going to also require some mental and emotional compartmentalizing, again, just like I was mentioning with Cancer in the first and Gemini in the 12th. The Jupiter, in order to help you release from some of the heaviness, is like, oh, that's a pretty intense, heavy thought about yourself. There's a lot of weighty things that come with that. There's some history there. There's a lot of truth there. And fuck it, maybe it's all wrong. Who knows who knows anything? Like, it's kind of like, I feel like it's that kind of voice in your head that's going to come in and be like, don't take yourself so seriously, or you can get back to being so serious, but maybe tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, I get that. I think, it's interesting too, just riffing off that quickly, Adam, is that, Jupiter in Gemini, Saturn in the first house, the umbrella I keep getting for Pisces is boundaries, and even boundaries within your own psyche. I remember being like on a silent retreat years ago, and after about a day and a half of a silent retreat, you start going like, who is that dick in my head? Oh, it's me. I'm the thinking about it all the time and taking myself so freaking seriously all the time, And it's just like, and you have to really say like, it's enough. Enough. Right. I'm just going to walk around and look at the cherry blossoms and then go back to sit. It doesn't have to be this massive philosophical understanding. And that it strikes me as that what you were saying, that's their idea. Yeah.
Yep. I love it. Well, this has been really fun. I know you do have to go. I also have to go because my daughter's, one of the reasons she came in here is I told them, when you're home from school today, I said, if my door is closed, wait until it's not closed. But she ignored that instruction. But afterward, remember I told you that we've been having this conversation about magic? Yeah. So she was like, well, isn't what you do magic? And I was like, yeah, kind of like it is, but it's so we're trying to have a difficult conversation. She asked me if she could have an astrological consultation. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I was like, oh wow, I knew this was going to happen at some point. Like I've talked, she knows about the signs, she's been around astrology her whole life, but this is the first time she's ever been like, I want you to read my chart. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like, well, so we're going to do maybe 10 minutes. You know what I mean? We're going to do something very super light and fun. And then Summer, that's my other daughter who just came in. She came in to make it known that it's not fair that Gigi gets a reading and she doesn't. So she is also in queue. So got a few consults I got to do right now.
You're backed up, man. You gotta really get it moving.
What I'm going to do. I'm going to be like, oh my God. The Lord of Death is moving into the house of naughtiness. you had better, when we say go to bed, don't come out 14 more times. Otherwise, no.
You know what Pluto says about not finishing every bit of your plate.
Exactly.
Oh, that's adorable. I love that.
Anyway, thank you so much. I want to tell people where they can learn more about you. www.alexamorosi.com. You can book a reading with Alex, learn more about his work, join his newsletter, get his mailings. He breaks down moon cycles, does a lot of wonderful work. On Instagram, it's Alex Amorosi Healing as well. Can't recommend Alex highly enough as a healer, as a reader. Just one of my favorite people ever, and so fun to collaborate with you every month. And yeah, I think next month we're going to be in fully into Jupiter in Gemini. I'm probably looking
Mhm.
at the trine between Jupiter and Pluto,
Yep.
and some new things as well that are coming up. So I'll look forward to that.
Yeah, me too. Always a pleasure, my friend. Yeah, like in June, this fun trend continues with all the Gemini coming up in June. So for sure.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
totally does. Well, anyway, all of you thank you all to those of you who have listened and commented. We appreciate you guys. If you stick around after I sign off, there's a video that we've tagged on so you can learn more about the upcoming class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. Our year one program in Ancient Hellenistic Astrology begins June 16th. You can learn more about it if you stick around. Thanks again, Alex, and we'll see you guys again next month.
Thanks, Adam. See you soon.
Bye. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, my year one course in Ancient Hellenistic Astrology that begins on June 16th. If you'd like to learn more about it, of course, you can always do some digging and looking at the course page on your own. I'll take you over there right now and walk you through it. But if you want to, you can go over yourself and look. Nightlightastrology.com is the website. Click on the courses tab and go to the first year course. This is the one that begins on June 16th, the perfect place to start for people who would like to learn more about natal astrology from the Hellenistic point of view. So, this is a 1-year course in Hellenistic astrology, which is the oldest form of astrology, and it is the form from which all subsequent forms of astrology come from. It shares a lot in its roots with ancient Indian astrology. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what characterizes Hellenistic astrology, but just to familiarize you with this page, when you go to the first year course page and scroll down, you can learn more about everything that's included in the course. Some of the main features include 30 classes on the year. These classes are spread out through units of curriculum. And in between the major units of curriculum, we have breakout study sessions led by our tutoring staff. We also have an interactive group forum discussion that is staffed with tutors year round. You always get your questions answered within 24 hours. So there's a lot of support built into the program as we work our way through the curriculum. We also have recommended reading, listening, optional quizzes, flashcards, bonus lectures, more than you could possibly read in a year, honestly. So we just have a large and long biography and sort of library of suggested bonus content that will fill in blanks and also supplement and deepen the material that we are studying. You get lifetime access to all the recordings. If you cannot attend the webinars live, they meet on the weekends. But if you can't attend them live, then you are welcome to follow along with the recordings, which are made available to you on the class website. So this class meets on Sundays from noon Central to 2 p.m. Central, or 1 Eastern to 3 p.m. Eastern time. And you might translate that, I guess, if you're on the West Coast, it would be 10 a.m. to noon Pacific time. During the program, in addition to working our way through all of the major curriculum, the major foundational elements of Hellenistic astrology, we place a strong emphasis on preparing ourselves to read charts for other people. Whether this is a hobby for you or something that you are endeavoring to practice professionally, the course is built for people who are really there for a lot of different reasons. This is your hobby, this is your passion. You hope to do this for really no one other than yourself, or maybe friends or family, or someone who really decides they want to start a practice. You can take this class at whatever level of interest or depth that you want because of the amount of material that we make available to you inside and outside of class. You always have access to the program too, so you can always take it at your own pace. You can attend live, follow along with the recordings, some combination of both. And then the breakout study sessions are really helpful in addition to our interactive group forum discussion. You can always ask us questions. You can email me anytime with questions. So we have a lot of support in place. Now, the curriculum, we move through the foundational elements of ancient astrology. You may look at the curriculum and say, well, I know something about these things already, but not really, not unless you've studied Hellenistic astrology, because the way that ancient astrologers talked about houses, signs, planets, aspects, essential dignities, chart delineation is radically different from what most people learn when they start studying modern astrology. The reason for that is that it's only been in the past couple of decades that we have finally had access to the vast majority of ancient texts on Hellenistic astrology. We were literally missing the bulk of our ancient tradition. So the kind of rebirth or reawakening of ancient astrology is really new, which makes this very exciting because everything you've learned in modern astrology is probably coming from the lens of what is called psychological astrology, which is a way of looking at the birth chart in terms of the planet, signs, houses, and the way in which they may relate to your psychological makeup or profile. In this way, birth charts are a little bit like an elaborate Myers-Briggs. So you have the personality profiling, which is the way that most people look at planets, houses, and signs. That you'll notice my Mars, my Venus, and they think of them as aspects or dimensions of your character and personality. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, we utilize much of the same language, and we certainly have that approach available to us in this program because ancient astrologers also looked at the chart in terms of psychological makeup. However, one of the main distinctions between modern astrology and ancient astrology is the emphasis that ancient astrologers placed on prediction. They looked at the chart in terms of a field of karma that defines the native or the individual's fate or destiny. And so we look at houses, signs, planets, aspects as a way of understanding what patterns, themes, and topics are going to be most prevalent and at what times, because they also had a very elaborate system of timing techniques. The year one program is all about learning to read the birth chart and understanding the ancient Hermetic sort of Platonic Pythagorean philosophy that was behind the establishment of all of the doctrines and teachings of astrology itself. So it's really about understanding where everything comes from. It's the why behind everything that greatly empowers people when they're learning astrology. It is not nearly the same when you just study lists of adjectives and descriptions for houses, signs, planets, aspects. We want to understand why. Why do we do these things at all? Where did it all come from? And when you understand that, then you have something like a skeleton key by means of which you can access your own creativity, your own intuition, rather than being told, just play these notes in this order and it will sound good. You're learning to improvise. Which, could anyone ever want to play? Why would you want to play an instrument if someone told you, well, here's how to play it. Play this, play that. And you never learned how to play something of your own, or you never learned how to use the scales in ways that were magical and, pertain to your own genie, your own genius. So when we study ancient astrology, one of the main things we're doing is we're taking people beyond anything that they think they've learned about houses, signs, planets, aspects, and we're teaching them where it all came from. And once you have that, then you're really cooking with fire. You have a magical, intuitive capacity that is very rare and precious in astrology. So anyway, we move through a lot of different elements, but not in the way that you've ever learned them before. And that's a really important distinction. So anyway, after all of that has been said, in each unit, we spend, maybe up to 10 hours on houses. And then we have a breakout study session, and then we have reading and bonus material. So when we talk about houses in this class, you are learning where the concept of a house ever came from in the first place, what it is, how it works, and how it's different from a sign. You're also going to unlearn and break a lot of bad habits, because not by any intentional ignorance, but modern astrology, being bereft of its ancient textual tradition, has been teaching a lot of things that are just not in line with where the actual theoretical foundations of astrology come from. So you're also going to break some bad habits, which is really good for people who maybe know a little bit about astrology already, but are seeking to clarify and understand theory in the context of the 2,000-year history of astrology. So anyway, this class is going to prepare you to read birth charts for other people. But then by the end, one of the great things about the program is that the way we do that is not just by pumping you full of theory and history and philosophy. We are also, in the last portion of the program, inviting live clients into the class. And that's great, because when we have live clients come in, you're going to see me read from them using the theory and techniques that we've been studying. And you're going to see how they can be applied artfully, as well as, giving you some tools and methods and techniques to use to set you up for success. Seeing live astrology practice while studying it is the best way to learn. So the last portion of the program, we turn toward that hands-on approach. Anyway, so that's a bit about the program. If you have any questions you want to ask, email us, info@nightlightastrology.com. We're happy to answer any questions you have whatsoever. I also want to point people to the payment options at the bottom. Early bird payment saves you $500 off. That is a great way to save. The payment plan is breaking the tuition into 12 monthly installments. If that works better for you, no worries, you can do that. And then need-based tuition. we, for many, many years now, dating back to 2010 when I started teaching astrology, I've always had some kind of sliding scale option available for people when studying astrology. Sacred science like this should be accessible to people of all different socioeconomic backgrounds. So we pride ourselves on making sure that there is tuition assistance available so that if your budget doesn't match with the payment price that we ask for, and that's an honest assessment that we trust you to make, that you can take advantage of the tuition assistance and set your price within a sliding scale that we provide for your monthly tuition for 12 months through the program. So please feel free to apply for that if it makes sense to you. We don't want people hurting themselves or overextending themselves. A price that fits your budget is available through the need-based tuition. We just ask that you apply early because we do fill up sometimes. So anyway, that is it. I hope that you will consider studying with us, and thanks for taking time to learn more about the program. See you later.